were informed about any of the signals. The Chief of Naval Intelligence in Washington, Captain Alan Kirk, recognized the message as plans for a bombing raid, but his persistent attempts to warn Kimmel ended when he was assigned to other duties. At Pearl Harbor, the Admiral had no way of knowing that Kirk had been repeatedly refused permission to warn him. Kimmel's immediate problem was to convey to Admiral Stark his worries about his fleet. Meanwhile, the Japanese Consul General, Nagao Kita, was supplying Tokyo with even more information. Neither Kimmel nor Short knew how quickly the situation was slipping away from them. By mid-November, the best information Kimmel had was that the Japanese fleet was mainly in the ports of Kure and Yokosuka. But by then, Yamamoto was almost ready to strike at Pearl Harbor. He had already ordered his task force to assemble, but not in Kure or Yokosuka. His ships were at that moment slipping into Saiki Bay on the island of Kyushu. Around the flagship Akagi, 4 other carriers were closely anchored. This was one of the messages Eric Nave claims the British would have intercepted and decoded. Battleships, cruisers, submarines, and a fleet of tankers were also named. The information must have been extremely important to the naval experts in London when they received it from Singapore. The Dutch were also watching. General Hein ter Poorten, commander of the Dutch East Indies Army, controlled an intelligence operation which a few days later tracked the force. They watched the force as it moved from Saiki Bay up to Hitukapu Bay in the Kurile Islands. Only a negotiated breakthrough could now halt the force. That same day, Japanese diplomats were told what they should listen for if negotiations failed. The code words Higashi no Kazeami, east wind rain, would indicate a break with America. Nishi no Kazehare, west wind clear, would indicate a break with Great Britain. And for Russia, the message would be Kitano Kaze Kumori, north wind cloudy. Eric Nave recalls the episode.
There was a message that came through in consular codes too. It had general distribution. I'm sure that it went to naval codes, to naval command. I'm sure it went in the diplomatic to the ambassador in Washington, people like that. Roughly speaking, it was a war warning that when diplomatic relations deteriorated badly, that this will be indicated in a message from Tokyo in the news, halfway in the news, and repeated at the end.
In Singapore, on November 20th, the British codebreakers would have picked up Japan's first ominous statement of war. In Washington, Cordell Hull, the American Secretary of State, had been involved in a round of exhausting talks with the Japanese ambassadors Namura and Kurusu. Both sides believed they were near to a negotiated agreement over the question of the oil embargo. Then, on November 22nd, the Japanese strike force was given its sailing orders. It is possible that Washington received this information from the British, but they also discovered from their own secret sources that Japan had now asked Germany to back them if they went to war with America. On the morning of November 26th, The waiting Japanese ambassadors were presented with an impossible ultimatum that stemmed from an angry Roosevelt. Feeling betrayed, Hull told a colleague, "You cannot give an ultimatum to a powerful and proud people and not expect them to react violently." The following evening, in Washington, signals experts intercepted and recorded a private telephone call to Tokyo. Kumaicho Yamamoto of the Japanese Foreign Office received a call from Special Envoy Kurusu, still pained at his treatment by Hull the previous day. "5,000 miles away from Washington, it had been a strange summer and fall for the officers charged with the safety of the Pacific Fleet. Kimmel was still fighting a battle with pen and ink to prevent his fleet being further weakened by demands from the Atlantic, but he could no longer avoid a general feeling that war with Japan was not very far away. General Short, faced with the need to send out long-range patrols, had only a handful of suitable aircraft. His demands for more were not seen as a priority. Then, out of the blue, came alarming news. Washington advised Short that diplomatic negotiations appeared to be terminated and hostile action was possible. Washington was informed that Short took their message only as a warning against sabotage and that he had bunched his planes together for easier defense. The War Department did not correct him. A similar warning to Kimmel pointed out the possibility of conflict, but only in Southeast Asia, 5,000 miles away. Nor did Rochefort's daily summaries contain any indication of a more immediate threat. Rochefort's radio direction finders swept across millions of square miles of the Pacific every day, searching for information about the Japanese fleet. Then, on November 26th, Rochefort's summary mentioned an intercept. Rochefort thought the fleet was still in port, but what he had picked up was a serious breach of radio silence by the commander of the carrier force, which was, by then, well out to sea and heading east across the Pacific. The following day, Washington eavesdropped again. Two days later, Rochefort recorded another vital intercept, again without a position. The Haie, a battleship with the strike force, was in fact more than 600 miles out into the Pacific. Later that same morning, a young journalist drove into Washington. Joe Lieb had influential contacts in Roosevelt's administration.
Cordell Hull was Secretary of State, and he called me on Saturday morning around 9.